welcome into another episode of Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We got a really good episode. We're really very close to redraft season. Dynasty season's going on right now, and we got a great show today.
Yeah, so we're going to start with some news before we head into our must-draft players. We start out with DeAndre Hopkins and some notable news in Tennessee as Hopkins picks the Titans over the Patriots. Zach, what do we think of this move from a fantasy perspective?
I mean, from a fantasy perspective, you kind of like it and you kind of see its weaknesses. You can go both ways on it. Of course, the talent of DeAndre Hopkins, he slots in right away as the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee. This season, he's going to be a beast. You would have to say as that number 1, and if they keep just giving him a bunch of targets, he'll make anything really happen. You could see the weaknesses from this move. Based on Ryan Tannehill as the quarterback, has struggled a tiny bit to make a connection with his wide receivers the past couple of years, and really heavily relied on Derrick Henry and even got him involved in the passing game. But I think this is a good move for D-Hop. I mean, it's the perfect situation. He has a lot of motivation now because a lot of teams did not want him. He tweeted about that right after he signed with the Titans. I think it's going to be a good move as the wide receiver 1 for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting is that he signed a 2-year deal, which kind of gives them a little bit of a window to make some noise. You know, you kind of have that 3-headed monster now that they're trying to get with Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and DeAndre Hopkins all together. Tannehill's kind of aging out a little bit. Henry's kind of right before the cliff that they're expecting to come. And so they bring in Hopkins, and it kind of lets them relax a little bit and try to make a run. I'm sure they'll make another move if they're good. If they are not good, though, I think this actually does help the development of Will Levis. In the case that during the bye week in week 7, they turn to him. I think that having a guy like DeAndre Hopkins there actually is a really good thing for a guy like Will Levis that a lot of people are not really so high on, especially in the dynasty community, being compared to guys like Carson Wentz, things like that. I think it'll really be helpful for him. Hopkins, though, I think that, yes, it really gives him the opportunity to be a 1. That's why he obviously chose that. Thinks that there's, he doesn't have to play against those AFC East cornerbacks and safeties, which I'm sure definitely was a consideration. He gets to stay away from that for 6 games. And so he's going down south. And I think truly he'll have wide receiver 2 production from a fantasy level. And I think that that's an expectation that you should have. Right now, his ADP is 50. I think that'll go up now that he finally made a decision. And so, yeah, you're looking at about a 4th or a 5th rounder for Hopkins. I think that that's worth it.
Yeah, I was just going to say in ESPN in redraft, they have him ranked 23rd amongst wide receivers and 51st overall. I agree with you. I think that's going to jump up. I think a lot more people are going to go for Hopkins. It does lead into the discussion. I want to talk quickly just about dynasty and what this means. The age is getting up there for DeAndre Hopkins. And I think now that he is the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee, I do think a lot of people are going to want him. There's a lot of people who see this move and say, oh, he's a wide receiver 1. I want him. I want him on my team for the last couple of years of his career. I think it could be a time to maybe think about trading him. If you're not so comfortable with the situation he's in, you may say, okay, he might have a rookie quarterback soon, or you just don't trust Ryan Tannehill. I think you can get something good for DeAndre Hopkins because the value is now there. We told people to stay and hold till they figured out that situation. You could maybe get some good pieces for DeAndre Hopkins with the age getting up there, as well as the situation now that he's going into.
Yeah, and again, he's 31, so it's not like he's a 37-year-old wide receiver, but at the same time, I totally get that, and to maximize his value would be wise. I think it also just kind of depends on where you are as a team. If you're one of those teams that's trying to go for it, then you're probably going to keep Hopkins and ride the wave and, kind of just take the losses as they come later on. But that's a piece that you would obviously want if you are a contender. So if you're a rebuilder and you have him, yeah, I think it might be a really good, smart move to try to at least shop him, see what the interest is around your league.
Yeah, there could be an overpay on DeAndre Hopkins. He's that big of a name, and he's going to be the number one. Like I said, it's not like he's going to be in a tough situation where he's not going to get those targets. He's going to get a ton of targets, and people are going to want him. So maximize his value right now, while he's has that value coming away from Arizona.
Yeah, as far as hurting anyone's value, I think obviously Treylon Burks probably takes a big hit. A lot of people were expecting him to take a step forward this year, but then again, he's not going against the top corner for each team. So, I don't know if it's that big of a hit for Burks, and especially from a dynasty perspective. I still would keep him where he is. I don't know that his value is trending down or there's a panic or you need to sell or anything like that. And I mean, Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears, we spoke about them the last couple of weeks about their impact in the passing game, and Henry kind of doing a little bit of the screen game down the stretch. Spears is known for doing that as well. And so I think that from an overall perspective of the Titans, there's a lot to look at from a fantasy perspective. And again, if they do turn to Will Levis, I don't know that changes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. Treylon Burks probably takes the biggest hit. I don't think it really affects a guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later, Chigakonkwo, the tight end for Tennessee. I don't think it affects him too much. I think it mainly affects the targets for Treylon Burks and those other wide receivers in the wide receiver room for Tennessee. Henry's going to get his touches no matter what, so I don't think it affects him too much. Maybe in those passing situations, instead of a check down to Henry, they go to DeAndre Hopkins instead. It's a toss up there, but I think Treylon Burks probably takes the biggest hit. But I feel like people might just run away all of a sudden from Treylon Burks. I wouldn't do that. He's super young, still has a lot of years left in the league, and I would hold on to him. Just maybe ride the wave. If it gets really bad, then you can see what you could get. But the value is probably very low right now, so you're not going to get much for him.
Yeah, and I would say on the other side of it, if you are looking at a team that might be like that, maybe this is a time that you can buy really, really low on a guy who has a lot of potential. I think that would also be a very wise move.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so now let's get into it. It's our must draft players in redraft. We kind of, at the end of the episode last week, we, gave each other some homework. 3 guys on each position. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and then we did some defenses and kickers as well. That we'll throw in there. Just kind of guys that are on our target list throughout the draft. There was no specific, has to be at the top or has to be at the bottom. Just guys that you think could have a really good year. And we haven't seen each other's lists, which I think is the most interesting part of this entire exercise. So let's start off at quarterback. You could go name your 3 guys first.
All right, so my 3 guys, and do you want me to talk about them?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I'll go through my 3 guys. The first guy I got is Jalen Hurts. He's ranked quarterback 3 in redraft right now, and there really is just absolutely nothing that tells me Jalen Hurts isn't going to be great again this season. He's in the perfect system, great receivers, great offensive line, an offense that really runs everything through Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's going to struggle this season. I think it's going to be another great year for Jalen Hurts in this offense. My second guy is a bit of a question mark because he had a poor season last year by his standards, but I think he's coming back for a really strong season, and that's Justin Herbert out in Los Angeles. There's people saying this guy can't throw for 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. I mean, we're talking about a guy who threw for 4,700 yards and 25 touchdowns, and he wasn't healthy for, I would say, 65% of the last season. He had that rib problem, and it really slowed him down. 4,700 yards still and 25 touchdowns. This guy could get back to 5,000 yards, and the numbers he put up in his rookie season, he was a monster for Los Angeles a couple of years ago. I really think he could get back to that as long as him and his wide receivers stay healthy in this offense. This offense is going to be slinging it around. I know people may say, oh, well, Kellen Moore may want to run it a little bit more, give it more to Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler got as many touches as possible last year. He's going to make sure he gets the job done. I think Justin Herbert has a great season this year. My third guy, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback 8 last season. His offense only got better in the offseason. That's what you have to say. He has a ton of potential in this league. I think he's going to be a reliable starter this year. I'm not expecting massive numbers, but the right amount of numbers of a guy you want to draft in the top 10 to be your starter. I think Trevor Lawrence sits near the top of that list. And those are my 3.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with the guy you just mentioned there, Trevor Lawrence. I think that for me, he's going to take a big step forward this year. And I think that he really took a huge step forward last year where, there were a lot of question marks of not his ability, because obviously his ability was ridiculous. And it was the reason why he was slam dunk number 1 pick when he was coming out. But it was more so from the fantasy perspective of he wasn't generating a ton of points. And now I think we really have started to see the fantasy football value that he has. He ran 5 touchdowns last year. I think that number is going to go up. I think he's going to utilize his legs, and they realize, hey, he's pretty good. I think that he's in that second tier, but I do believe he will be a top 10 quarterback. Right now, he is ranked quarterback 9, 75th overall in the ESPN rankings, but I think he will finish top 10. That's a guy that I would definitely target. And then there's the guy all the way at the top that I wrote down. It's Pat Mahomes. Listen, I understand the whole argument against taking a quarterback really early. The people who know me know that I love taking the quarterback early because I like having the advantage at the quarterback position. They score the highest amount of points. Therefore, take the top guy into those 30 to 40 point monster games. You could put Josh Allen there as well. But I like Mahomes this year over Allen, kind of neck and neck for the last couple of years. And so if you don't get Mahomes and you have to settle for Allen, that's a pretty good reason too. So I think that you can probably, that's kind of the rounds where they're trying to get the elite tight end or the elite tight ends, the Andrews kind of range and that, I'd rather have the quarterback at that spot. And then when it comes to the wides that are in there, I think you can grab a lot of value later on, and we'll kind of get into that later. But then my third guy here, and we mentioned a little bit earlier in our few episodes ago, and then we mentioned him last episode, actually, I believe it was. It's Kyler Murray. I think that Kyler has a massive discount right now, just based on the fact that he's probably going to miss some time. But it's one of those guys that, listen, if you don't get one of those top quarterbacks, and you need to grab some sort of backup that has potential upside, Kyler might be that guy. I think it's an easy safety valve backup. Right now he's ranked quarterback 20, 173 overall. Kyler, to me, he still has a lot of talent over there around him. And so I think that when he does come back healthy, I think he'll be okay. And grab him at quarterback 20 is a very low risk. So I would take the upside on Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, those 3, you look at Kyler, the value is definitely there. I mean, there's still question marks. Is he going to play this season? Can he get back to 100% or near 100% and be that starting quarterback in Arizona? It's still a question mark, but if you can get him right now and stash him for a little bit early season, I mean, you're set up if he comes back very well for the later parts of this season. Patrick Mahomes, I knew you were going to put him on the list, so I stayed away for a second. So I let you go. I mean, there's 3 words: ride the wave. That it's so much fun. You get Patrick Mahomes, just have fun. He's going to do everything you need him to do. He was a monster last season, over 5,000 yards, the number 1 fantasy quarterback by a mile in the end. I mean, that's a great pick. If you can get Patrick Mahomes, just take him and have fun. It's going to be a fun team if you do have Mahomes on your roster. And we already talked about Trevor Lawrence, going to be another good season down in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and I think that it's also a lot of fun when you you watch your Sunday game throughout the day, and then the night game comes, it's Pat Mahomes playing because they play all those primetime games, and you dump a 40 burger, you're down 30, and there's a 40 spot that's put up, you win. And that to me is so much fun. And, fantasy football, yes, money is involved in a lot of these leagues, but at the same time, get your guys and, enjoy the ride. That's what I would say. So now let's jump into some running backs, and I think we might have some similarities on this one. I'm just half feeling. Let's hear your three.
All right, so number one on my list is Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. He finished running back 6 last season and could have been even higher. He tailed off a little bit towards the time when Deshaun Watson came in as starting quarterback, and that may worry people. I don't think it should. I think Deshaun Watson came in and tried to learn the offense, passed a little bit more. And that could have led to a little bit of struggles for Deshaun Watson in those 6 games that he came in towards the end of the season. I think Nick Chubb is going to be a monster this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished top 3, top 4 among running backs. He's that much of a beast. The best thing about Chubb is exactly what you're getting from him. He's the most consistent running back in my mind in fantasy football. He does everything possible to get that threshold and get you that exact amount of points that you need. I think if he's healthy, this will be the best season of Nick Chubb's career. One thing I will say, do yourself a favor, stash Jerome Ford on your bench. He's the backup running back. There's just nobody else. So if for some reason Chubb gets hurt, Jerome Ford can step in and have a Nick Chubb-like season. So grab Jerome Ford if you're going to grab Nick Chubb. My second guy is Alexander Mattison, another guy that I feel like we know what we're going to get this season from him. There still is a bunch of question marks. Is he going to live up to Dalvin Cook? I think he's just going to give you that solid running back total. I don't think he's going to be outstanding, but a solid RB2, a reliable guy in your lineup. He's going to be the number one clearly in Minnesota this season. He was very reliable last season when he was backing up Dalvin Cook. I think they're going to use him constantly as an every down type back in Minnesota. They could have Nwangwu and McBride get some touches up in Minnesota. That's very possible, but I mean, this is Alexander Madison's backfield. That's what they said. We're going to ride with Alexander Madison if Dalvin Cook is out the door, and look what happened this summer. My third guy is Samaje Perine. He's the backup to Javonte Williams this season, but as a dynasty owner of Javonte Williams, it's really hard for me to believe that Javonte is going to come in. He'll be a workhorse to start the season. He might not even be healthy. We might not even see him till week 6, week 7. Who knows? Draft Samaje Perine. I think he's going to be a beast in any week that Javonte isn't playing. Another team that there's really just nobody else behind those two. I think Samaje Perine's a really solid value pick. And who knows? Javonte Williams might not play the entire year. Still a ton of question marks. I would grab Samaje Perine, and he could be a solid RB2, RB3 on your roster each and every week.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Just based on the unknown right now, if your draft is coming up pretty soon, that might be that you pretty late, and his value obviously would be way higher if any news broke. So kind of get that return investment. And hey, listen, if the trade value is even there, maybe you even make a trade before the season, get a ridiculous offer from somebody. I think that would be smart. And I totally agree on the Chubb thing. Listen, he doesn't have Kareem Hunt there. That's the biggest thing. And he also started to get a little involved in the passing game. And so I think that's going to continue as well. Just as far as it goes, I think that Chubb is each year. He's one of those workhorse backs. He's going to be reliable. And that's kind of the theme that I went with a little bit. The first one, obviously, we got to start with Bijan Robinson. That's your guy. And I know, we have a dynasty draft this weekend and you got first pick. So congratulations, you get Bijan. This is going to be the Bijan show. I think that, we spoke about this earlier off stream, and there's only a handful of guys now that are considered workhorse backs in the NFL. A lot of these teams are now going by committee. The McCaffreys, the Ecklers, Chubb, those guys are just getting the bulk of the carries. Even Derrick Henry as well. I think Bijan's going to be one of those guys. I'm not sure that there's a ton of other values that you can get in the league than you can with Bijan, because I think that there's the potential that he could end up being the top scoring running back in the entire NFL this year. There's a chance he puts up Christian McCaffrey type numbers, especially if they start getting him involved in the passing game, things like that. But enjoy the ride. So I would say Bijan for me definitely sits at the top of the list of go grab that guy. The second guy is a guy we spoke about last week, and it's Jamal Williams. And I'm going to point right at the Kamara situation, and we're still not sure what's going on with Kamara. He had his court date and all that, but we're still not sure if there's going to be any suspension, things like that. There's a lot of rumors are flying right now, and Jamal Williams' value, he's right now running back 36, 105. Again, if your draft is coming up, that you might want to look at in the 9th or 10th or 11th round. Think about getting a number one running back in the 11th round of your fantasy draft. I think that that's an easy person that you could go target. And we said he could be the sleeper. I still think that that's true. Just based on what he did last year and how New Orleans runs the ball. And obviously, yes, they play in a dome, so they don't have to worry about weather for half of their games. I think that also is a big deal, especially when it comes to the run game. The third guy is David Montgomery, and we've spoken a ton about him. Just the perspective of he is the between the tackles runner, and I still believe that he will end up scoring more points than Jahmyr Gibbs this season. I'm not sure about from a dynasty perspective, but I do believe that he will score more points because I think he will score touchdowns than Gibbs does just from the running. I do think that Gibbs will get the PPR points, and Gibbs will be good. I think that they will both be good, and Montgomery will end up scoring more points.
Yeah, I one thing that stood out was Jamal Williams, and people, okay, they're questioning Alvin Kamara's situation. Is he going to play? Is he going to get suspended? Still a big question mark. We do not know right now. The biggest thing about Jamal Williams, and I talked about a guy, Samaje Perine, that we know that Javonte Williams is injured. And it's very unlikely that this guy, with how many injuries he had in his knee, is going to come back for the start of the season. Obviously, there's optimism from Sean Payton in Denver, but we just do not know. The thing I'll say is Samaje Perine getting drafted 7th, 8th, maybe 9th round. Jamal Williams is getting drafted in the 10th or 11th round. If you're not looking to grab him, I don't know what we're doing here. He's going to be the top sleeper. We know it going into the season. He's going to be the number one guy to look for later in drafts. He's has a great situation. He's coming off a season where he was top 20 among running backs in points and had a ton of touchdowns. They could do the same down in New Orleans, the same thing that Detroit did last season. You should definitely be looking at Jamal Williams. There's so much value there, especially if you could get him in the 10th or 11th round.
Yeah. So now let's jump right away into the wides. Kind of was across the board in all of these. I'm curious where you are in your wide receiver rankings.
So yeah, it was a tough one. I came up with my guys and I'm going with them. But my three guys, I'm confident that they're going to end up getting the job done. My first guy, it might be pretty obvious. We live in New York. It's Garrett Wilson, top of the list. There's not much to explain here. A 1,000-yard, top 20 receiver last season. 3 different quarterbacks with him last season, and he was still top 20. And now he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. You can't ask for anything better. Aaron Rodgers, who loves his top targets, loved Davante Adams for all those years. Was Davante Adams a top 3 wide receiver every single year in his prime with Aaron Rodgers? I mean, they're going to be targeting Garrett Wilson like there is no tomorrow. I love Garrett Wilson this year. I think there's a very good chance he's in the top 5 at the end of the season. I know how many wide receivers are in that group in fantasy football. I think Garrett Wilson's just going to get so many targets in this Jets offense, and they're going to ride with him the entire season. So he's number 1 on my must drafts in redraft. My second guy, we talked about New Orleans. I'm going to go with Chris Olave because I feel like he's in a similar situation to Garrett Wilson, a 1,000-yard, top 25 receiver. But now Chris Olave gets a quarterback that also loves throwing it to his top target, slinging the ball around. That guy is Derek Carr. We look at a couple of years ago in Vegas, Hunter Renfrow, 103 receptions with Derek Carr as his quarterback in 2021. Last season, Devontae Adams, 100 receptions in 2022 with Derek Carr as his quarterback. Yeah, there's questions about Michael Thomas. Will he be healthy? Rashid Shaheed, the run game, the tight ends. This is Chris Olave's room. I think they're going to ride him this season very heavily. It wouldn't be shocking at all if he got 100 receptions, Chris Olave, this season, based on the numbers of Derek Carr's top guy from the last couple of years. I definitely think Chris Olave is a guy to look out for, a guy who was finished in the top 25 last year. I think he's ranked in the top 15 or 16 this year. A guy to look out for, maybe second, third round, I feel like is where he's falling right now. My third guy, and yes, there's question marks, a lot of reports coming out. I'm still riding with it. Jordan Addison. I feel like he's going to be the top rookie wide receiver this season. I think he's in the best situation of the rookie wide receivers. Jefferson had 184 targets last season, a ton. Adam Thielen had 107 targets. He's now out the door. He's in Carolina. And KJ Osborne had 90 targets. So he's back for another year. But I think Jordan Addison takes over that Adam Thielen role. 107 targets to go around the room. I mean, give it to Jordan Addison. He can definitely be that guy, that number 2 up in Minnesota. Someone needs to take those targets from Adam Thielen, like I said, and it should be Jordan Addison.
Yeah, I agree on the Addison thing, and hopefully everything's okay with that, and he can, start the season regular and go right in. Because I think he is in the best situation when it comes down to those 4 rookies that got picked in the first round. Olave is an interesting one as well, and I would really point to the fact that there's really not a lot of competition. And we spoke about Michael Thomas and how people were drafting him on name and his injury history. I'm not sure that Michael Thomas will make it a full season. He's bound to miss some sort of time, whether it's an extended period of time or not remains to be seen. But he hasn't played in a long time. And so I think that, the grueling NFL season, I'm not sure that he'll be there for the full season. And because I think Olave is a good pick there. I actually have Garrett Wilson on my list as well. I think that this is the year that he is going to cement himself as one of the top wide receivers in the NFL. And the reason is Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers spoke a ton about him. And it's funny that you mentioned Devontae because so did Aaron Rodgers. He actually mentioned him earlier today about how impressive he's looked and how much it reminds him of Devontae when he first got to be with Aaron Rodgers. So I think that this is going to be a big year for him because I think the coaching staff and Aaron Rodgers is going to put him in the right situation. And right now he's ranked 19th. So that's that 2-3 flip. I think that's a perfect spot for him. And you can grab him there. That's a pretty good target to have there. Another guy that I have on my list right now, he's ranked 54th, wide receiver 26th. It's Jerry Jeudy. We spoke a lot about Russell Wilson and the step forward that he should be able to take because he can't really take more of a step back than he had last year. I think that Jerry Jeudy is going to get involved. I think Sean Payton gets him involved. The new coaching staff there as well. He was in the top 20, 35th though in target share. I think that number goes up. I think that Jerry Jeudy is going to take a step forward and have a bounce back year. And my third guy, you just mentioned him. It's Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, everybody still sleeps on him every year, and then he proves them wrong. Right now, he's ranked wide receiver 53, 124 overall. He's literally ranked as a 13th-round pick. Take the chance on the upside, flex option. If not, wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. And also keep an eye on Mingo out there as well. I think that that's another name that we're going to start to hear a lot of as Bryce Young actually requested that they go draft him. I think that also holds some weight as well.
Yeah, going into the season, all this talk about that DJ Chark is going to be Mr. Number 1 in Carolina. I'm not buying it. I don't know. I like Thielen. I think he's the best red zone target of the group down in Carolina. And you mentioned Jonathan Mingo, the rookie. Could definitely build strong chemistry with another rookie in Bryce Young at quarterback. And it could be a really big steal if you're able to get Adam Thielen later in drafts. The guy that you mentioned just before Adam Thielen, Jerry Jeudy, I think he's going to have another great year. We mentioned this a couple of times. People see Jerry Jeudy last year, and he was in the top 25. It wasn't like he had a awful year. He was top 25, and that was in a year where Russell Wilson really struggled. We are big believers in the Denver Broncos this year, you and I, and think that Russell Wilson's in for a bounce back year this season under Sean Payton. And I think Jerry Jeudy can definitely make it in the top 20, maybe in the top 15, if he can really start to work things out with Russell Wilson and they succeed in Denver this season. Jerry Jeudy, a really big guy to watch out for. He's probably going 5th, 6th round in drafts, a guy to look out for. That's where we talk about. That's where you win your draft. You got to get those guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, the sleepers that can have an impact. It's not always going to be the top guys on your team that will win it for you. Those guys just behind it, a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3 in Jerry Jeudy can really help you this season.
And I think that that's what makes me comfortable with taking the quarterback in the 3rd round, because you get those kind of wide receivers, the couple rounds, those next couple rounds after that, a guy like Jerry Jeudy, you can still grab a Pat Mahomes and then also get a Jerry Jeudy in the same draft. And so I think that, to have the distinct advantage of the quarterback, I still think is a thing. But just back to Thielen, the last thing I have on him, this is a rookie quarterback, and rookie quarterbacks come in games much faster than it is in college. And, they're kind of looking around and who's the guy open? It's going to be Thielen. He has a really, really good open rate. And he's going to be that guy that's going to be reliable for a young rookie like Bryce. And, that target in the red zone, it's going to be him. I truly believe that. I don't buy that Chark hype. I don't. And I think that Thielen will end up scoring the most points on that. But again, keep an eye on Mingo, because I think that that's a guy that he's going to start to build a lot of chemistry with.
Yeah, and just quickly, Brett, they look at Carolina this season, and you might say, oh, well, Bryce Young can move around, so can Miles Sanders. He's a running back, and maybe they're just going to run the ball a lot. I don't think they're going to run Bryce Young really ever. I think they're going to avoid that at all costs. The worries about the size of Bryce Young. They're not going to want to put him in a situation where a linebacker's coming deep at him in the middle of the field. They do not want to go anywhere close to that. I think they're going to keep Bryce Young in the pocket or hand it off. I think that's probably the biggest thing with Bryce Young. One of his strengths, though, is keeping plays alive. He does it a little bit different from a former Alabama quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, as he gets rid of the ball a little bit sooner. Tua likes to do a little bit too much, and that leads to injuries. Bryce Young has crafted getting away from that pressure and avoiding injuries.
Yeah, I think the most you're going to see Bryce move is some of those like play action bootlegs, and you kind of have the sliding pocket where the opposite tackle comes running across, so that way he still stays protected within a pocket, even if it is outside the middle of the field. But yeah, I think that this is going to be a year for him where he's going to get his feet wet. I think he's going to throw it more than he runs it. I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
So now let's jump into some tight ends, and mine are all the way down the board. I don't know yours. Where you guys have?
So it was interesting because I was trying to think of some guys maybe down the board, but I like some of the guys at the top of the board. I have one like who's at the top, and then I have one in the middle tier, And then I have one, a sleeper that you could definitely look at. I'll start off with my number one guy, and it's TJ Hawkinson. Number 3 on the board going into this year. He had the same amount of receptions, 2 less targets than Travis Kelce since he joined Minnesota midway through last season. That's how many targets he got. That's how many receptions he got. They got him involved to the max in Minnesota last season. I'm expecting another monster season for this guy. He's paired with Kirk Cousins, and they're really riding the tight end in Hawkinson, who can do a bit of everything. He's a very reliable tight end, a guy to look out for, and he's not going in the higher range like a guy like Travis Kelce. You can get a guy who maybe does a tiny bit less than that, but still gives you some really good numbers. He's going in the 40s right now in redrafts. A guy to definitely keep an eye on, TJ Hawkinson up in Minnesota. My second guy, I've been preaching him for a couple weeks now, and it's Pat Freiermuth in Pittsburgh. The Steelers love throwing the ball to their tight ends. They ranked 4th in the NFL in tight end targets in 2022, just dishing the ball out to those tight ends. People complained about the touchdown production. I'm pretty sure Kenny Pickett, it's Kenny Pickett, but I'm pretty sure he's going to get more than the 11 passing touchdowns that he and Mitch Trubisky combined for last season. 11 passing touchdowns in 17 games they had. I think that number is going to rise, and I think Kenny Pickett's going to be dishing it out everywhere. It's not like it's not like Freiermuth was the only one that really struggled for touchdown production. A bunch of guys did. Deontay Johnson had 0 touchdowns, and I'm still very high on him this season. But Pat Freiermuth, a guy to really look out for. You get him for very, very cheap. A reliable tight end who's going to get a ton of targets this season. He's ranked in the late 9th round. That's too low. Go grab him. There's a lot of question marks of Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts this season. I'd rather take Pat Freiermuth. I think it's going to be a more reliable target in Pittsburgh. Go grab Freiermuth, and you can even reach up a little bit to try and grab him as your tight end. My third guy, and he's been getting a lot of noise, and a lot of experts really love him heading into this season. I agree with him. It's Chig Okonkwo, who now, yes, DeAndre Hopkins comes in to Tennessee, but the Titans are a team that really don't have a ton of weapons. They're going to want to sling the ball around a little bit more because they know that Derrick Henry, he's not going to be the only one in that offense, and he can't take them on his back to the promised land. Chig Okonkwo, the Titans were 3rd in the NFL in target share among tight ends in 2022. 3rd in the entire league. I understand Hopkins, like I said, has made people worry, but Chig is the number 2, in my mind, receiving target in this offense, ahead of Treylon Burks and the rest of those weapons in the wide receiver room. I think he has a real strong chance, I will say, to be a low-end tight end 1 by the end of the season. I think that's how many targets he's going to get. He has a ton of strength and speed, maybe a different look from what defenses normally see in a tight end. I think that could help Tennessee out this season. Chig Okonkwo going very late in drafts. Draft him as a late round flyer, and he can definitely turn, like I said, in a low-end tight end 1.
Yeah, I agree on Okonkwo. I think that's going to be a good spot for him. And again, I keep pointing at Will Levis, but if they do go to Will Levis, he likes throwing to his end. And so I think that's a reliable target that he would have there. Freiermuth, I agree 1,000,000%. I drafted Freiermuth in the past just because they like going to him, and he's a volume play. And he's not as much known as those other volume plays like the Mark Andrews of the world and, the Wallers and so on. And then, Hawk's a monster. I think that he's going to have a great year as well. I went all the way downward. We start out here, tight end 15, 137 overall. We spoke about him last week as a sneaky sleeper there. It's Juwan Johnson. They traded Adam Troutman away to the Broncos. He finished as a top 50 option that will continue, and there's a chance he sneaks into that top 10 of tight ends. especially because he's got a new quarterback who likes to throw to his tight end. Next one here, pretty simple. Dalton Kincaid. Right now he's ranked 140, tight 17. I think there's a chance that they really do use him as a wide receiver, and he's marked as a tight end in the fantasy world. And so that's kind of a cheat code a little bit, just based on the fact that if they use him like a tight end, but then they start putting him on cornerbacks because they're lining him up out wide, and he's this big guy, I think he's going to get a lot of targets. I think that he's going to end up being one of those red zone threats that Josh Allen's really going to utilize, especially when he starts to fake it like he's going to run, and he can kind of find Kincaid in the back of the end zone. I think that that's going to happen a lot. A lot of people knocking because there's, of course, another tight end that plays out there in Buffalo. But I don't think that Knox is going to be able to keep up with the production of Kincaid. I think that, for Knox, that he had a touchdown in all 4 games down the stretch. And so, yes, there's that reliability. But again, I really think that they're going to use Kincaid more. And the last one is the guy that you love, and I know that you love him. It's Sam Laporta. I mean, the fact that Sam Laporta is ranked 257 right now, he's ranked 27th in tight end. We're talking about a guy who literally could be Hawkinson. He is going to fill the same exact role with that same exact offense. I think that this is a really good spot for him, and sky's the limit for Sam Laporta. So if he's there towards the end of your draft, you must draft him.
Please draft Sam Laporta. Please draft that and tell us that we told you so. Just draft him. He's going to be a monster. Like Brett said, he could be TJ Hawkinson. I mean, yes, there's a ton of weapons, but he's the tight end, and Detroit loved to go to the tight end a lot in this offense. I really like your pick before that in Dalton Kincaid, because I do think heading into this year now, he's might be the number 2 option. I mean, if you really think about it, he could be the number 2 passing option in this Buffalo offense that loves to sling the ball around with Josh Allen at quarterback. Yes, there's arguments for, okay, Dawson Knox, he's going to still be involved. I think Kincaid kind of takes a step forward than Dawson Knox did last season. And then another argument for Gabe Davis, who I like to call Mr. Inconsistency in fantasy football. He gets so many yards, but they come from very little receptions, and it's just a big question mark with Gabe Davis. I think Dalton Kincaid has a fair argument for the number 2 option up in Buffalo. And your first option in Juwan Johnson, he definitely can have an impact with Derek Carr at quarterback. Carr likes throwing to his tight ends. We saw it over the years in Vegas, and Juwan Johnson, a big, heavy red zone threat, a lot of size at tight end, can have another good year. One guy, I know it was only 3, but I want to put one guy that I thought you were maybe going to mention, but I wasn't sure. I like to put Gerald Everett on that list of tight ends to really look out for, because this offense has a ton of weapons. Justin Herbert's going to be slinging it around, like I said before, and Gerald Everett is another guy who can definitely get a lot of volume in that Los Angeles offense, as well as some touchdowns in the red zone.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of those. Now let's jump right into these defenses here. Came up with defenses and some of our kickers together. So we'll just go through the 3 of them. We have the Bills, the Jets, and the Niners. Zach, take through those 3 teams and why you think you put them there.
So there's still a question mark. I'm going to start off with my one that's a bit of a question mark. It is the Buffalo Bills, and it's based on their schedule. It's going to be a tough schedule this year, and you may not get what you're exactly looking for from Buffalo this year. They may be in the top 5, but they're lower than their ranking. I think they're number 2 right now. I don't know if they're going to be the number 2, but a very good defense nonetheless. And they're going to get a ton of interceptions. They're going to make quarterbacks work to get fantasy points on them. I definitely think Buffalo is a team to look out for, but be careful. You may not get what you're fully expecting from Buffalo this season because of that tough schedule. The second is the New York Jets. And this is a weird one because, yes, the Jets also have a really tough schedule, but I think the Jets defense is one of the best in all of football. Could be maybe in top 3, top 2. We saw last season, if the Jets offense just worked things out, they're a really strong team and they could really contend in the AFC. Now they get an offense that can really move the ball around. And I think their defense hasn't lost much. I think they're pretty much the same, and they could have a lot of fantasy points this season. Definitely a defense to have near the top of your list. And the number one team that I had on my fantasy team last year, and let me tell you, it was a blast. I was the 1 seed. They literally helped me every single week. Even with a bad matchup, they still put up at least like 5-10 points. It was no doubt about it. I wasn't worried at all. And that was the San Francisco 49ers. This defense just finds ways to be amazing. A ton of touchdowns, pick sixes, fumble returns. They got everything, a ton of sacks. The secondary, the linebackers, and the defensive line, they're all great. And they're very stacked up there. I definitely think San Francisco, that's another team. Enjoy the ride because they really can put up points for you, and they no doubt are the top defense on the board in my mind.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of look at defenses in a way of you're kind of just chasing interceptions. You're chasing pick sixes. And what gives you the biggest opportunity to score points? It's pick sixes, or fumble recoveries for touchdowns. But I look around at the quarterbacks they're playing against. And so to me, these 3 teams kind of work because, the Niners, they get to play against Arizona early in week 4. Tampa Bay's on the schedule. They get the NFC East. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that they can create some turnovers. With the Bills and the Jets, obviously they're playing against Tua, who turns the ball over a lot. They're playing against Mac Jones. And so, there's the opportunity there. The Jets get Houston, and they get Atlanta, and they get Cleveland this year, teams that could potentially turn the ball over. And then get this, the Jets late season schedule, when you would be in your fantasy playoff, they play Miami, then Washington, then Cleveland, and then the final week of the season is New England. Obviously, from a fantasy perspective, it depends on, where you are and what your league is set up if you week 18 at all. But if not, I mean, those are 3 great matchups that could be potential fantasy championship winners. And so I'm chasing touchdown upside, and I think the Jets actually make some sense there.
Yeah, and yes, they have some great options. Yes, they end up playing each other, the Jets and Buffalo. But that's really what you have to look at. Of course, yes, you're going to work through the regular season and try and add points up there. But I mean, the playoff schedule, if it's really good, don't be afraid. Also, I did this last year. Maybe take 2 defenses. And if you get 2 top defenses, then you're really set for the entire season. I did that last year. One defense I had was a really big margin worse than the other defense. I had the San Francisco defense, like I mentioned, and then I had the LA Rams, who ended up stinking up the joint. It was not fun, but I had the San Francisco defense, so it made it all fine. But like I said, don't be afraid to take 2 defenses. It definitely helps you out, and it sets you up that you don't have to go and make a waiver claim each week for a defense and go through that kind of way. That's okay, but you may be more comfortable if you can get 2.
Yeah, and I think that getting 2 is something that I've done also for the last couple of years. And, I had the LA Rams too in one of my leagues, and it was the Rams and the Chargers. And so it was the tale of 2 cities and within the same city. And so it was just, it always helps when if you are planning out taking 2 defenses, you could always drop one and add another defense and not feel like, well, I'm, rolling the dice every single week now because my defense is out on waivers, and, whichever, team gets him first, they're going to get the claim. You're not doing that when you end up taking 2. So I think that taking 2 is a smart move.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, so now let's jump to the kickers and the 3 guys that we have here: Tyler Bass, Daniel Carlson, and Will Lutz. Will Lutz, a sleeper. And Zach, I'll get into it, but let's start out with you. What you think of these three guys here?
So I'll talk about the first two, and it's Tyler Bass and Daniel Carlson, two guys that I've had on my fantasy team year after year. I think I've switched back and forth between the two of them just because they're very consistent. Daniel Carson's number 2, I believe, and I think Tyler Bass 6, 7, or 8 in that range of kickers. And just you want guys that they're in offenses that they don't score every possession, but they're consistent enough that they're moving the ball down the field. And I think that happened a lot in Las Vegas because there were some question marks of Derek Carr's decision making, and they would have to settle for field goals. I think it's kind of the same with Jimmy G. I don't think it changes much with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, and they might have to settle for a bunch of field goals. I think Daniel Carlson, very reliable each and every year, knocks in a lot of field goals, a very high percentage of makes every single year. And that's definitely a guy to look out for, the number 2 guy on the list. And the second guy, Tyler Bass, is up in Buffalo, and they move the ball down the field very quickly. Tyler Bass, even with Buffalo, a team that goes for it a lot, they try and really be aggressive on offense. That still helps Tyler Bass because if they get a ton of touchdowns, then you get the extra points from Tyler Bass, another very reliable kicker and a guy to look out for. But Brett, it's time for the Will Lutz preview here.
Yeah, so just to mention Bass quickly, they score a lot of points, and point blank, I mean, they're going to be in the red zone the whole time. And so because of that, listen, if they don't score the touchdown, that's great. You get the 3 points. And sometimes that actually works when you kind of stack a quarterback with a kicker. I've found myself actually getting Tyler Bass and Josh Allen. So no matter what, you're rooting for the Bills to at least put any points on the board. So, an interesting decision that you could potentially make if you get a guy like Josh Allen, go grab Tyler Bass as well. Same thing with Carlson. Listen, they're going to score a lot of points, and that's what it comes down to. Plain and simple. And you get into the red zone, and again, if you can't score the touchdown, there's your points. And now the Will Lutz. Listen, I've been a huge fan of Will Lutz here for the last couple of years. I took a chance on him last year in Dynasty, kept him the entire year through the offseason. And a lot of people were shocked at me. And here's what it comes down to. First off, they have the 4th easiest schedule heading into this year based on strength of schedule. So you would expect them to score points. The second thing was, we were unsure about who their quarterback was going to be this year coming in. And I'm thrilled that it's Carr. Listen, we're in New York, and there were a lot of angry people when the Jets were potentially going to get Carr. And the reason was because he can't get the ball in the end zone. He gets it close, and he can't score it, and therefore he can't win. That to me means Will Lutz is going to score a ton of points. The other thing is, Will Lutz was hurt last year for a bit, and he was coming off of ankle surgery, and so he's fully healthy now. This is a guy who drills 50-yarders regularly, and he always has done that for his entire NFL career. I think he gets back to that, and they're going to give him some opportunities, and he's going to get the opportunities because he has Derek Carr as his quarterback. So to me, with the schedule, the fact that he has Carr at quarterback, I think this could be a really good year for Will Lutz.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because, I mean, that offense, like you said it, if you can't shove it in the end zone, I mean, then you're going to have to settle for field goals. There's going to be a lot of points for Will Lutz to get. The thing I noticed about kickers, and you don't really think about it too much when you're drafting kickers, because the top guy on the board, Justin Tucker, has been reliable each and every year. I look at playing and their stadiums where they play and that kind of decision. 2 of the 3 guys we just mentioned play inside. They play inside. The ball's not moving around. Yes, you got to worry about games on the road, but I mean, you got 8 or almost maybe 9 games at home. That's what you got to focus on. That's what you got to look at. And it really does have an advantage for guys like Will Lutz and Daniel Carlson, who kick the ball from really deep. These guys can kick it from 50, 60 yards pretty easily. And they put up a ton of fantasy points. That's something to definitely look at. And I know one of the guys we had, Tyler Bass, obviously he plays up in Buffalo, and the weather is not great up in Buffalo. We know that. However, he's proved over the years, you've seen it in front of your eyes, that he can get the job done as a kicker and be reliable no matter what the weather is up in Buffalo. So that's something to take into consideration. I know kickers might not be the most important position in a lot of people's minds, but it could help in certain weeks where you're very close, you have a close matchup. Kicker could end up being the difference some weeks. So definitely be prepared for that going into draft season.
And I'm just going to lean into the Will Lutz curve right now. Again, to me, it also comes down to the length of the kick, because a lot of these leagues, they award more for 40-yarders. They award even more for 50-yarders. That leg really helps. And, you mentioned the Dome, and it's funny. I just pulled up New Orleans' schedule here just to take a look at some of their away games. They have Carolina in week 2. Week 3, they get a matchup with Green Bay. And so it's an early season, so you're not going to feel that Lambeau snow. Then they travel to New England in week 5. Then they go week 6 in Houston, a dome. Then they go week 8 in Indianapolis, a dome. Then they go week 10 in Minnesota, another dome. Then they go week 12 in Atlanta, another dome. Then week 16 versus the LA Rams, another dome. And then they go to sunny Tampa Bay for week 17, a New Year's matchup. So it's a really good schedule when you consider the weather, the dome, all of that. I think that this could be a really good year for Will Lutz.
Will Lutz, sleeper of the kickers, no doubt about it.
Yeah, definitely taking him. And you guys should take him too. I mean, listen, it comes to a point when you get to the end of your draft where you get some of those teams that take the kicker in like the 11th round, and you're like, what are you doing? Then there's the bulk of the teams that take them in the last 2 or 3 rounds. And if you are left without one of the top guys, the Justin Tuckers, the Tyler Basses of the entire kicking world, then you can fall back on a guy like Will Lutz, because he probably will be there.
Yeah, and people like myself get a little bit worried. You're like, all right, it's very late, and you may have like the 9th or 10th pick in the draft, and you're like, oh God, the kicker's going to be my last pick. Yes, you can plan maybe a couple of rounds before to grab them, but I look at now, you have those options, and just do the research and do the right research. And a guy like Will Lutz can pop up and really help you and be like those top tier guys and fit in perfectly.
Yep. So that'll do it. Make sure that you take a look at some of our other episodes for some of the sleepers, some of our reaches as well. And take a look back at this episode and use it in your draft, because, draft season's coming. You need to prep really hard. This weekend, we have our own Dynasty Rookie Waiver Draft. We're going to break down the first 2 rounds of that draft on next episode, and then we will go through our 5 rounds and let you know what we did and why we made our picks. You'll also get to take a look at our Dynasty rosters as we kind of break down what our outlook is. And training camps have opened, and some of them are opening this weekend, so it's exciting. We are finally heading into football season, and it's great to be back talking about football. See you next week with some of that Dynasty Rookie Waiver Draft breakdown.